Hey guys, welcome back to another tying video with Old Florida. My name is Mike. Today we're going to be tying the swimming shrimp. This is a great all-around search pattern. Without further ado, let's jump into the vise. This is kind of a longer tie, and it has a couple little complicated things like a dubbing loop, but don't be afraid. So first thing we're going to do is start our thread. We're going to start it a little bit behind the eye of the hook, just leaving a little bit of room. We don't want to add too much bulk to that eye of the hook right now. We are going to come in here with our scissors and trim out that tag. I need more mason. This is going to be 16. So first thing we're going to do is take our 16 mason, take a couple inch piece. I like to take my flat jaw pliers and just crimp down a couple little bites of it. That way you don't add as much bulk, and you have to wrap a little less to secure it because you have that more rigid kind of bite to it. It adds a little bit of texture to that mono, so you don't have to worry about it slipping or pulling out. Once I have that, I'm going to come in here with my rabbit strip. I'm going to cut like a 6-inch, 5-inch piece off the rabbit strip just to handle nice and easy. With that rabbit strip facing backwards, with all that hide or hair facing backwards, we're going to tie that in right on the top side of the shank of the hook. Nice tight pinch wrap. I'm going all the way pretty much to the point of the hook, maybe a little bit even before the point of the hook. And we're going to tie that down nice and tight. After we do that, I'm going to take a bodkin and about 1/2 inch behind the bend of the hook, I'm going to poke a hole in that hide. Kind of widen it a little bit to fit our mono through there. Going to place our mono through that hole. And this is just a foul guard preventing that rabbit strip fouling around the bend of the hook. So with this loop, make the loop a little bit longer than the hole that you just made, and pinch that mono past the hole that you just made. You don't want it the same length, you want it longer, so that tail can't go below that mono loop. I'm going to come back in here with my flat jaw pliers and I'm going to put a couple more crimps. And then with my scissors, I'm just going to cut that right now so it's a little easier to work with. And I'm going to tie that loop right there. That way, we do not have to worry at all about our rabbit strip fouling. It cannot fall below, and it can't slip below the bend of that hook. So after I got a couple wraps on there, I'm going to trim my tail. I'm probably going to make this tail right around 3.5 inches from the bend of the hook. I like to cut mine in a V shape. I think it looks way better. Looks like a more finished fly. And don't cut the hair, just cut the hide if you can. All right, from there, I'm going to grab another piece of 16. And with that tail facing up, with that curl facing up, I'm going to add a couple more crimps in there just so it gets a better bite and less bulk. I'm going to tie that tail with that curl straight up the back of the hook, and then we're going to secure that down. All right. I am trying to tie this a little bit faster, so next thing we're going to do is tie our dubbing loop. This fly you can do with crosscut, but I prefer a dubbing loop. I think it just looks better, has more movement, and it weighs less, and it doesn't saturate the fly. So to tie the dubbing loop, take your finger, put it on the thread, take 2 or 3 wraps on the shank of the hook, and then take 2 or 3 wraps around that thread completely, and then pull it, and then you can tie that off. And now you have a loop in your thread. Sometimes it gets a little twisted and you just got to undo it. You got a loop in your thread right there, all the way back to where that rabbit strip started. So we could take our dubbing spinner. I'm going to set that right there. Take our dubbing wax. I'm going to wax that thread so it keeps everything in place. I'm going to take my dubbing spinner, or sorry, my dubbing clip. I'm going to take my rabbit and I'm going to fluff that rabbit. I take it in between my pointer and thumb and I grip it down with my other fingers down at the bottom. I'm going to take my dubbing clip. I'm going to grab all that material in that clip, as much as I could possibly fit. One full clip is enough for this fly. I'm going to take my scissors and trim all of that as close as I possibly can to that strip. I want to preserve as much length of this rabbit as I possibly can. A little tip is, before you actually put it in the dubbing loop, in the clip it's a little easier to work with to get the butts straight of this material. That way when you come in here, when you go to grab the material in your loop, it's a little bit easier to make it pretty. With your fingers you can adjust that material. It's very important just to get the very last little bit of those butts lined up with that thread. You don't want to pull them too close, but you want to pull them as close as you can without pulling them out. And then we could spin up our dubbing loop. Give it a good little spin. Make sure we got it twisted up nice so that material can't pull out. And then for me, what I found works really well, especially on rabbit and dubbing, is a piece of Velcro. This is just a regular piece of Velcro. It still has the adhesive tape on the back, but works really good for pulling out rabbit dubbing or just any kind of dubbing, SLF dubbing. We use this quite a bit. So I'm going to take my thread, I'm going to pull my dubbing loop out to the side, and I'm just going to move my thread up with pretty close touching wrap, or pretty close wraps, but not like touching, just kind of get my thread out of the way. Now I could palmer all of this dubbing loop back, and as I wrap, I'm going to do nice tight touching wraps. I kind of want to build a little bit of a bulkier body, so nice tight touching wraps, palmering everything back as close as I could get it. Perfect. Once we end that, I could take my thread and I'm going to back that thread out till I reach that same tie-in point that I have. I'm going to put 2 wraps behind that dubbing loop, pull everything back, and then 2 wraps in front of the dubbing loop. And then I'm going to comb that out while I have some room there. Perfect. Next step is taking our fly enhancer legs, or any legs that you would like. And I do like to pull on these legs just a little bit before I tie them in, because sometimes that flake will actually be a little bit too much and it'll break the leg right at a flake. So I just want to make sure they're good before I tie them in. So I'm going to make a V around my thread, pull that thread straight up, and with that I'm going to take 2 of the legs and tie it directly down the shank of the hook on the closest side to me. I'm going to move my thread back forward to where I tied it in, grab the other set of legs, put it down the other side of the shank of the hook, and tie that back. So that way we get 4 legs, 2 on each side of the shank of the hook. I'm going to clean up those wraps. I'm actually going to go trim these legs out a little right now, just so they're a little bit easier to work with. So I'm going to pull them down, and I'm going to go a little bit shorter than the tail. I'm just going to trim all of them at the same exact time. Let's just go a little bit shorter than the tail, maybe a 1/2 inch. Next up we have our body of the fly. I'm going to sweep my legs back so I don't accidentally capture them. I'm going to tie that polar chenille in with a nice tight pinch wrap all the way up to those legs, really tight up to those legs, and I'm going to clean up my thread wraps, make a nice little smooth thread body. And now palmering this palmer chenille really tight, because this is going to be the body of our fly, so we do kind of want to add a little bit of bulk with this stuff. So every palmer, pull that material toward the point of the hook and really focus on getting those nice tight wraps. It's going to be quite a bit of this stuff, probably going to do 8 or 10 wraps, and we're going to go almost to the eye of the hook, leaving just about an eye of the hook back. I'm going to capture that, make sure my thread is snaked in between that material. 1 or 2 wraps to capture that material while pulling everything back, and then 2 wraps in front while pulling everything back, and then we could trim that out. And then I'm going to come in here with my handy little piece of Velcro, fluff that material back out of there, pull everything back one more time, see where we're at. Awesome. Now we got our hackle. I'm going to take my barred schlappen. I'm going to grab a piece that looks nice and barred. I don't want the widest piece, but I do want a pretty healthy wide piece. And as soon as you see the barbs getting a little fluffy, that's where I want to pull that material to give us a good tie-in point. So I just stripped some of those barbs going the opposite way down that feather. And then I gave myself a really clean tie-in point. I'm going to tie all the way back right up on that palmer chenille. All I did was just pull that little tag end of the feather. It's a little bit quicker than cutting it. I'm going to move my thread, giving myself the tiniest little bit of room in front of that eye, and then I'm going to palmer this hackle nice and tight, as close as I can make those touching wraps. Same as that palmer chenille. Nice and tight touching wraps, almost on itself. And with my fingers, I'm just making sure not to trap anything. Just really tight touching wraps. I want to use a good portion of this feather. Once I have that, like I said, I just left the tiniest little bit of room up in the front of that eye because I don't want to add too much bulk on the eye of that. All right, once we got that, we can take our hot beads. These are going to be chartreuse. Another cool thing about this fly, you can add 2, 3, 4 hot beads depending on the depth of water that you're fishing. So you can kind of control exactly how deep you want this fly to swim or suspend. So once you have your hot beads on there, I'm going to take my fingers, I'm going to sweep everything back. I actually broke my capture wrap on my hackle. So I'm just going to put this back. I'm going to palmer it once or twice more. I'm going to recapture that hackle. Once I got that recaptured, sweep everything back and add 2 or 3 really tight wraps on there, just so that don't fall off again. Perfect. So I'm going to take my beads, I'm going to pull them down. So once you sweep everything backwards, you can kind of see the fly has a natural body shape already. And all I want to do with my mono is follow that natural body shape. So I'm going to pinch my beads, kind of see exactly where I want to tie that in. Right there. And once I get my tie-in point, how deep I want those beads or how big I want that mono, I'm just going to make a little crimp right where I want to tie it off. I'm going to put a couple really tight wraps on that little crimp. This is where having really nice sharp scissors comes in. The Dr. Slick razor scissors are awesome for it. Trim out that mono really tight, and then I'm going to start putting a couple really tight wraps. You do have to make sure those wraps are super tight because you do not want that keel pulling out. That crimp definitely helps. And then we could go ahead and whip finish this fly. I'm going to do 2 sets of 3. That usually holds really damn good. Make sure to really cinch down on those wraps, and then you could pop your thread off. All right. And then that's pretty much the done fly. I'm going to come in here and trim it just a little bit more. Got our legs, got our keel. The awesome thing about this fly is just the movement that it has. Rabbit tail, I mean, rabbit has some of the best movement of any material, I believe. Flash underneath the belly, which looks really good in the water. The keel helps it ride hook point up, and riding hook point up is super critical, especially over oyster bars or grass, anything like that. Good amount of flash, the legs, added movement, just an all-around great pattern. I'm going to trim those legs just a little more. I'm going to trim my tail just a little more. A little bit shorter. Snaking this over oyster bars, over the grass, throwing it along mangroves. You can add a weed guard to it. It gets a little hard to add a weed guard just because you have some bulk in the head already. Other than that, This is just an all-around awesome little pattern. Tie it in different colors, black and purple, chartreuse, tan and chartreuse. The variations are endless. As always, thank you guys for watching this video, and we hope to see you guys out on the water.